Last week, the U.S. markets reached all-time highs as there was over $44 billion that entered the markets, and that's the highest weekly inflow that we've seen in history. In this week's video, I'll be going over the returns and the news stories from last week, and Matt will be going over the latest election news coming out of the major battleground states. There was a strong rotation out of technology and into small and mid-cap companies last week, as the Russell 2000 was up over 6%, while the NASDAQ was actually down about 0.5%. The Dow Jones and the large cap companies had a strong week as well, up over 4%, where the S&P also had a strong week, up over 2%. Now, the biggest takeaway from last week is that now all of the major US indexes are positive, with the Russell 2000 up about 4.5% year to date. The Dow Jones is up over 3%. And even though the NASDAQ was negative last week, it's still up over 30% year to date and clearly still the winner this year. And lastly, the S&P 500 now is up almost 11% for the year. As we're shooting this video on Monday morning, the markets are continuing their move higher, up about another percent. And this is off the backs of a second company coming out saying that they're having successful coronavirus vaccine trials with approximately 95% success rate. There were three major news stories that led the markets higher last week. First is that initial jobless claims fell to about 709,000, and that's the fourth straight week of declines. Also, this is the lowest level we've seen in initial jobless claims since the pandemic started. The second story is that about 80% of companies have reported their third quarter earnings so far, and they're on average beating their estimates by about 17%. Lastly, and probably most importantly, is that the first company came out last week and said that they're having successful coronavirus vaccine trials at about a 90% rate. So now we have two companies with approximately 90+% success rates for their coronavirus vaccines. And if you couple that with the news stories that I mentioned above, it looks as though the US economy is in much better shape than it was just a few months ago.
So now I wanted to give an update as to what's going on with the election, state by state, lawsuit by lawsuit. And I wanted to first start in Pennsylvania, where last week a judge ruled in favor of the Trump administration to segregate all ballots after November 3rd that were received, and those votes, chances are, would not be counted. Now, we don't know how many votes that is just yet. Now, also, on November the 16th, another trial begins where the Trump administration is trying to get rid of about 660,000 votes in the state of Pennsylvania that were not duly certified. They're claiming that the Republican side of the poll watching was not able to view about 330,000 votes in both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh during the counting process. So the judge hopefully is going to put a ruling towards that sometime this week. And also, it was being reported over the weekend that the lawsuits in Pennsylvania were being thrown out, but it's actually two lawyers stepped aside after receiving multiple threats to their firm, and all lawsuits still remain. So now let's move on to the state of Nevada, and this lawsuit is a little bit different. They are suing that people voted in the state of Nevada that aren't actually legal residents. They also are claiming that thousands of people that are actually dead cast absentee ballots. And lastly, Nevada poll watchers did not signature verify their ballots, which is illegal in the state of Nevada. So now let's move on to the lawsuit that covers four different states. That is Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania's back in this one, and Georgia. And all four of those states stopped counting their votes on election night. And then later on in the night, had ballot dumps of over 100,000 per state that the lawsuit claims is statistically impossible that all of the votes went to Joe Biden, or an extremely high percent, over 90 on all of these ballots. Now, the last lawsuit that I did want to talk about was the federal lawsuit that focused in on the Dominion electronic ballot counting software. And this has a focus in on Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Virginia, and New Hampshire. So it involves a lot of different states. And Sidney Powell, who's one of the head attorneys on President Trump's legal team, said that the Dominion software flipped millions of votes from President Trump to Vice President Biden, and that all of these counts need to be audited. Now, it's important to note, in all of the states that I just spoke about, none of those states have certified their votes yet. And Georgia will be the first to certify on November the 20th. And they are currently in the middle of a recount along with the state of Wisconsin. So for the week ahead, all eyes are going to be on what's going on with the election. And again, to reiterate, Georgia is going to be certifying their votes on November the 20th. And now Georgia is a key state for both candidates at this time. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us on Facebook. See you next week.